the set you see on screen right now is a set that terrorizes the nightmares of pretty much every GSC NU player there is. Like, I'm sure every single GSC NU player you ask has a horror story of them just getting swept by this set as soon as they leave in a bulky water. As soon as Stantler, as this deer gets in on a bulky water and sets up ice cream and a couple of curses. This is probably one of, if not the most infamous sets in GSC NU. I believe it was Dawn invented this set, and then I think it was initially speaking, like people didn't think it was gonna succeed, and people thought it was dumb, I think, but like eventually it started proving itself, and here we are today, where this is one of the most horrifying Pokemon to be looking at full HP. Well, I don't personally think Stantler is ban-worthy broken, and I think it has enough flaws to hold it back. But honestly, looking at this set, I do honestly understand why people think that, because it is very, very punishing if it gets in position to just sweep yeah, so however, another set that, like, while this is what Stantler is most infamous for, I don't personally think this is this. How do I say this? While this set is what Stantler is most well known for, it's not the set that I think is the most splashable of one of Stantler's sets. Because the thing about this set is that, like, you can't use it early game because you want it to preserve its HP for later in the game, so that it can actually set up and sweep. The set that is far more splashable, and I think is that has been spammed a lot recently, is Return, Earthquake, and Rest Talk. Rest Talk Stantler. Now, so this is basically compared to the light screen set, it doesn't end games nearly as well, because it doesn't like sweep nearly as well, but is very, very dangerous in the early game. You can actually send it out in the early game to just do damage, whereas with the light screen set, if you try to do damage with it early game, it won't be able to sweep later on. So, why do you use this set? Well, here's a reason. Dugong. So, Dugong is a Pokemon that I feel as though like is a very important Pokemon to account for in the team builder, because if you don't have a proper punish to it, then you are up the creek without a paddle, and it is very, very difficult to recover from. And Dugong is very infamous for this because the most common offensive Pokemon in the tier is Xatu, Pineco, Dodrio, and Octillery. And this score is very good. The thing all four members have in common is that they really, really struggle to break Dugong. Xatu and Dodrio are weak, have to run away from it. Pineco isn't really doing anything to it. Well, I mean, it can explode, but like, it sure as hell not a reliable answer to it. And you're not exactly gonna switch Dugong into Pineco's explosion unless you know for sure you don't need it. And then Octillery, which in theory would actually be good against it with Hidden Power Electric sets. Theoretically, this set just completely owns Dugong, but the reality is that Hidden Power Electric doesn't even come close to 3-hit KOing, and so Dugong can just like rest through it. And Octillery, it's not enough for Octillery to just get one crit. It needs to get a crit when it will actually kill, because otherwise Dugong can just pull rest and just make your efforts go to waste. And that's not even considering the fact that Dugong can freeze with Ice Beam. And then the matchup is entirely in Dugong's favor because of Ice Beam freezes. And this core really struggles to deal with Dugong, and it needs a solid Dugong Punisher. Now, being solid against Dugong is actually Dugong is actually a somewhat new team building concept. In fact, a lot of people in the old days of GSC and you didn't really care as much about being able to punish Dugong because for a couple of reasons. One is that often Dugong can be, as good as Dugong is, it can be overwhelmed because, especially by strong attackers like Furo's Double Edge, with spikes up, Dugong's really going to struggle to stand up to it. Like it can stand up to a full HP once, but like once it takes even just a slight bit of chip damage, it's in range for a Double Edge to a KO from Furo with spikes up. And two is that a lot of Dugong sets in the older days were actually toxic encore sets that didn't use rest talk, or like I don't know if it's, I think they might have used rest but not sleep talk. I don't actually know what the thought process was back then, but yeah. In fact, if we look at some of the old sample teams, a lot of these sample teams do hold up today, but like one example of what I'm talking about is this Furo and Persian offense team. While this team seems generally solid, and it was back then, but the thing is, it really struggles against Dugong, because we have the same issue with Zatu, Octillery, Hanko, and Dugtrio, where the big four, where the main offense core in the tier just like can't really break rest talking Dugong, while Furo has to run away from his Ice Beam, and it sure as hell not switching. It sure as hell not switching into Dugong and winning the 1v1. Persian, these teams could like try to preserve their Persian so that it can come in on Dugong and annoy it with Screech and Double Edge, but eventually because Persian is not actually weak to Surfer Ice Beam. But the issue is that Persian often takes a lot of damage in the weak slot. So, and as you can see here, it obviously does not work in recovery. So it's really just gonna die to it, and it's not at all a long-term answer. Despite this, though, this team was able to get away with being weak to Dugong because, as I mentioned before, Toxic Encore was the more common set back then instead of Rest Talk. So, yeah. How does this all tie into Stantler? Is that nowadays, like pretty much nowadays, offense teams really want to have at least one Pokemon that punishes Dugong in some way, shape, or form. And other ways to do that is, and it doesn't need to be for pokes with like a good type matchup versus it. Like Chinchou is like the hardest Dugong punisher with Thunder, Surf, Rest Talk, and it also sits on Octillery all day. But Chinchou is somewhat limited in terms of viability. I think it is quite flawed, and like it has really good pros, but it does have a normal amount of flaws. And there are other options too. One of the ones that I defaulted to when I started playing is Wigglytuff. Curse, Double Edge, Rest, Sleep Talk. One thing people need to understand. The important thing to note here is that compared to Octillery, which is Dugong's most direct competition, Dugong is much weaker. So, Wigglytuff, for example, Wigglytuff, while Wigglytuff cannot at all like rest talk on Octillery and is like if it tries to switch in on Octillery and like pull a rest loop, it is almost certainly going to just get 3-hit KO'd by Surf. Wait.
After a long, uncertain.
I forgot to put this in the loop. Is almost certainly going to get 3-hit KO'd by Surf, and all it takes is just one bad Sleep Talk roll for it to just die. Whereas with Dugong though, Dugong does way less damage to Wigglytuff, so Wigglytuff can more comfortably curse up on it and punish it and hit it multiple times with Double Edge. And Wigglytuff is certainly not the only Pokemon this applies to. Restock Primate is a similar dynamic, but even more so, it's even more so better against Dugong than it is against Octillery, because it actually hits it super effectively with Clash Off. So Dugong immediately gets fucked out. And it's also the case for Porygon. There's also Hitmonlee is a similar dynamic, and while compared to Primate, while it's far less offensively threatening, it is a lot bulkier. So it can more comfortably switch into Octillery and Dugong. Other examples include Restock Persian, which I haven't really liked because it's quite frail and is surprisingly dicey against Dugong from my experience, but I think it can work, and I think people have succeeded with it. And other good punishers, Dunsparce is though that's kind of outclassed IMO. Kingler is it's not super long term because it doesn't run rest talk, and so it's gonna get worn down by spikes, but it does work. And there's obviously rest talk Raticate, but that's gonna last. And there's also Porygon, who is, in my opinion, one of the less good options for the role, but it does get the job. But it can get the job done. It can also use Curse just like Wigglytuff can. And Porygon's also a bit worse for the role because without rest, then it's going to give Dugong more opportunities to freeze it. But yeah, and this is where we get to Stantler. You see, compared to the Stantler fills the role of a Dugong Punisher quite well, and the thing about it compared to the other ones I mentioned is that like it's not good at immediately breaking Dugong. Like it only has, I think it only has like a very low chance to actually it has a very low chance to actually 3-hit KO. Actually, I'm not even sure if it can 3-hit KO with Return. And but the thing is, Dugong can't 3-hit KO it back, and so they'll eventually get into like a rest war, which Stantler is favored to win because it's faster, so that it gets more fast rest off, and it also has more PP on Return. Like Return has only 4 less PP than Surf and Ice Beam combined, so you can very easily just PP stall the shit out of it. And no matter what you do, you can force Dugong's not going to want to continuously take damage from it because it really wants to be able to check Zatsu and Dugtrio long term. And instead of just trying to like go for 1v1 that it is not at all favored to get. So now you may think, well, that's cool and all, but why rest talk Stantler over other options? Like, why can't I use just one of those other options and like Curse Light Screen Stantler? Now, that is definitely an option, but the reason what I think makes Restock Stantler, but there are a couple other factors that I think makes Restock Stantler one of the best options out of the possible Dugong punishers, and thus is a very easy fit onto many teams that I believe. First off, its speed. Some of the other, you may have noticed that some of the other options I mentioned for punishing Dugong are very, very slow. Like the aforementioned Wigglytuff example I mentioned. Like Wigglytuff is base 45 speed, which ties with Octillery. Remember how I mentioned that like Wigglytuff is not at all like reliable in the 1v1 versus Octillery because it just gets 3-hit KO'd and you can just get a bad 6-talk roll? Well, a large part of the reason why it's so bad versus Octillery is that its speed ties with it. Meaning that it needs to rest, it needs to rest very quickly and can thus very easily be overwhelmed. Now, this is not to say that like Stantler is somehow like a good switch into Octillery, because it's not. But compared to Wigglytuff, Stantler is very much. Stantler's speed makes a huge difference against Octillery. Huge difference here because it makes it far less bad against Octillery. Like, and it actually means that like Stantler can like get hits off on Octillery if need be because of its faster rest, and it'll be harder to punish Stantler for taking a Surf because it can get a rest up on so much more things than Wigglytuff can. Like the thing is, the way you can look at it is that you put a Dugong Punisher like Stantler or Wigglytuff on a team to punish Dugong, and Wigglytuff taking a Surf from Octillery and severely hurts its ability to punish like something like Dugong later on. Or it's not even just taking a hit from Octillery. It hurts its ability to switch into Dugong. If Wigglytuff taking a hit from like anything can hurt its ability to switch into Dugong later. It's not just Octillery, like most other offensive threats, and that's why it's pretty difficult to get Wigglytuff in on much anything else because on anything else because you really want it to be able to consistently check Dugong. Stantler, on the other hand, you can't be more aggressive with it because like even if it's slightly weakened, as long as it can still switch into a Dugong Surf or Ice Beam, it can switch in, rest up, and be good to go versus Dugong. Like you're still going to be safe versus it. Compared to Wigglytuff, and it's not just Wigglytuff, it's also Porygon as well. Although Porygon has recover, so it's not as bad to be forced to recover early, but you got a point. The speed. So what this essentially means is that, like as mentioned, you can play more aggressively with your Stantler early game compared to Wigglytuff, and take full advantage of its wall breaking and try to get it in on like Pokemon that get forced to rest, and you're much more likely to come out on top. An Octillery, you're not gonna want to switch into an Octillery that is at full HP that is a full HP and is gonna click Surf. But like, if you can predict a rest from Octillery, then you can just get Stantler in, and Octillery's not gonna want to risk the 1v1 because they can just pull multiple consecutive bad Hidden Power Electrics, and it's not gonna have a fun time. And regardless of what happens, even if Stantler gets forced out after just taking one Surf from Octillery, then you can still weaken it and the extra damage you could get on it can be huge. The second reason is Earthquake. Now, Earthquake is compared to most other of the Dugong Punishers I mentioned earlier, compared to all the ones I mentioned earlier, Earthquake is a very good coverage move compared to what most of the other Dugong Punishers I mentioned gets. And the Earthquake is amazing because of, well, two reasons actually. One, rock types, Graveler, Sudowoodo, and Pupitar, and two, Weezing. Out of all the aforementioned Dugong Punishers I mentioned earlier, Stantler is by far the most reliable of them against Weezing. Like, if you remember the ones I mentioned earlier, Wigglytuff is slower and also gets its Curse Sweep stopped by its Explosion or Haze. Primeape, with its Rustlock set, just flat out is really bad versus Weezing, and Weezing is one of its best checks actually. Porygon does not want to. Porygon's slightly better because it can paralyze it and recover stall on it, but it hates taking Slip-on poisons because it uses Recover instead of Rustlock, so. And Hitmonlee just does like absolutely nothing. It's even worse against Weezing than Stantler than Weezing than Primeape is. Stantler, on the other hand, actually not only scares Weezing out, but it can potentially switch in on it. It's definitely not reliable though. I wouldn't. It's definitely not reliable though, but like. Weezing is definitely not going to want to risk taking Earthquake from Stantler because its HP is so important for checking physical attackers and fighting types. And when you consider I'm trying to get like so many thoughts at once. When you consider that how Weezing can stop, well, pretty much every physical attacker in the tier except for Dugtrio and ground types, this is a very unique and valuable asset that Stantler has that makes it generally far more difficult to stop than the other Dugong Punishers I mentioned earlier. Earthquake also lets you immediately burn the rock types, which is crucial because a lot of the other normal types, like because compared to like Wigglytuff, Wigglytuff can force these rock types to explode, but not only would them exploding on it mean that mean that you don't have your own Wigglytuff anymore, and thus Dugong is a lot scarier. It also is prone to getting crit from Earthquake, from these rock types. Graveler in particular is pretty bad because its Earthquake is very strong, and a crit Earthquake does like almost like 60 to 70%. So it can be really bad if it gets it. It's Sudowoodo. Sudowoodo comparatively can't really go for a crit on Wigglytuff because crit only does like 50 to 60, and Sudowoodo is going to be cursing up alongside Wigglytuff. So Wigglytuff will be faster, so even if it gets hit by a crit Rock Slide, then Wigglytuff can just rest up and just be good to go from there. But Sudowoodo still explodes on Wigglytuff, can still explode on Wigglytuff. And a Pupitar who Wigglytuff just flat out has to run away from because Screech. And it's pretty bad to have to run away from Pupitar because it is much better against the water type foods here than other two rock types are. Now, these rock types, Graveler and Sudowoodo exploding on Wigglytuff is actually very good for certain teams, mainly the teams like Fearow, because it opens up the passive Fearow, and that's actually one of a team combo that like I have used to very, very good success. But it doesn't change really change the fact that like Wigglytuff doesn't 1v1 these rocks super well without it dying in the process. Whereas Stantler immediately threatens them out with Earthquake. So yeah. Let's compare Stantler to other fast, physically attacking rest stoppers of this tier. If we compare it to, say, Primeape, and Hitmonlee, and let's say, let's compare it to Persian as well. Is it really? I don't think there's anything else worth comparing to. Fearow doesn't really. Yeah, no, not Fearow, because I'm mostly comparing it. I'm not going to include Fearow in this because Fearow is weak to Dugong, and I want to compare Stantler to other Dugong punishers here. Primeape and Hitmonlee, and to a lesser degree Persian, can more effectively immediately threaten out Dugong. And Primeape especially is much stronger than Stantler. And so you might be thinking after seeing this, like, what gives with Stantler in comparison to like these three? Well, the Weezing example already, for one, the Weezing example already, like, all of the VGs and to a lesser degree Persian, like, usually are going to want to run away from it, whereas with Stantler can immediately threaten out Weezing, but all three of these have their own set of issues that make them overall much worse as physically attacking rest stalkers that punish Dugong. Primeape's moves miss, and Primeape always misses its moves. Cross Shot only has 8 PP, and is Primeape is overall much worse at dealing damage than Stantler, much less consistent at dealing damage than than Stantler, I'll say. And also, it also gets hard-walled by Gloom, which for comparison, Stantler completely obliterates. Which Stantler can just sit on with Restock. Hitmonlee is similar in that regard. Yeah, Hitmonlee is very similar in that regard, and it is even worse, and has these issues like even worse. Although like not the consistency issue, obviously. Its moves actually have accuracy, but it does even harder into Gloom. It does even harder to losing. It's also overall worse than Primeape against Statsu because it doesn't even speed side. It just product gets outsped, and it doesn't have the potential to paralyze it on the switch with Thunder and just win the 1v1. Version is a slightly interesting case. Its Restock set has been making a appearance lately, but I'd say it's overall much worse than Restock here because, well, for one, it gets walled by the rocks, and it's much more frailer, meaning that and I've actually found it to be decently dicey against Dugong, especially since it relies on Double Edge so much, and the recoil kind of just sucks. So as you can see here, like I feel like Stantler. I overall feel as though Stantler is overall, in my opinion, the most one of the most reliable Dugong punishers that isn't, because it isn't as because it doesn't have as bad of flaws as like most other Dugong punishing options have. And I'll get to his flaws in a bit, but yeah, I do think their flaws, though enough to not make it not broken, are enough to where like I think it outshines a lot of them most of the time. Now they're still really good Pokemon, and they still fit on, and they still have other very important perks over Stantler. But I think Stantler, Restock Stantler is like, but due to these flaws, I think Restock Stantler is one of is overall easier to fit onto a team than most of the other options I mentioned earlier. So, and it's not, so when it comes to like Pokemon that it punishes, it's not, so, Stantler Restock Stantler in particular is also quite a threat to balanced teams, and because balanced teams usually run a lot of the Pokemon that it punishes, like Dugong, and so there's Dugong and Gloom. Actually, I don't know why I made another Dugong set. Like Stantler, Now, one of the most balanced teams nowadays, I mentioned balanced teams usually run like a lot more of Pokemon that Stantler just kind of just shuts on, like Dugong and Gloom. So these teams like just tend to give Stantler a lot more opportunity to just come in and just fire off its returns. They aren't they obviously are not completely helpless against it, but like with the recent rise of balanced teams with Scrabbler, Gloom, and Dugong, otherwise known as like Triple G, because Scrabbler, Gloom, Gong, gravel grooves, if that's your taste. I feel like Restlux Stantler's ability to be like very, very annoying to these kind of teams is another big reason why I think is a very easy Pokemon to slap onto a lot of teams. Now, I've been praising Stantler for a while now, but like I think it's worth going into his flaws, and I'm gonna go over its flaws and how it handles these flaws as well as teammates. The main flaw of Restlux Stantler is that it is much more vulnerable to Xatu than most other Pokemon are. Xatu. So the issue is that Xatu outspeeds Stantler and does big damage to it with Psychic. Psychic is a guaranteed 3-hit KO on Stantler even without spikes. And this is pretty bad in comparison to a lot of other Dugong Punishers like Wigglytuff and the two other Dugong Punishers and Wigglytuff and Porygon, because those two are Pokemon that Xatu actually needs to run away from. Well, most of the time at least. As long as they're not like weakened. Now, these two should definitely not be mistaken as reliable switch-ins to Xatu, especially not with spikes up. Like they can do it at full health like once, but it's quite dicey, and Wigglytuff especially can easily be forced to rest. Stantler, on the other hand, needs to immediately run away. Xatu can not only switch into it, but Stantler needs to immediately run away from it. And the worst issue is when it's sleeping, because then Xatu just is very free against it. When it's sleeping, it's only like 1 in 3 to get to hit it on the switch with to hit Xatu with return, and meaning that Xatu has a very easy switch into Stantler, unless it's at like super low health, and even then it's still favored to switch into Stantler unscathed. And unlike the other two, sleeping Stantler cannot at all afford to put Sleep Talk versus Xatu, because it can call Earthquake and then just be completely fucking there. And even if it calls Rest, it's just kind of just delaying the inevitable, where it just dies to Xatu and just stays in and does stuff. Meanwhile, Wigglytuff, where like if it's staying in Rest Talking, Sleep Talking, it is generally far more favored against Xatu, because Xatu doesn't get the 3-hit KO without spikes, and it can. So Wigglytuff like clicking Rest, calling Rest on Sleep Talk is kind of just delays Xatu's death rather than its own. Wigglytuff can still get hacked by Psychic Special Death Drops, but the thing with all this is because there's a decent chance. There's not even a decent, but a more than decent chance for Xatu to just die from the exchange. Xatu is not going to be wanting to switch into Sleeping Wigglytuff. You're going to want to find a different way to abuse a Sleeping Wigglytuff, like say Primate. And considering how Xatu is very threatening with spikes up, a Sleeping Stantler just like letting it in is very bad. And this kind of issue does not extend to just Xatu, it also extends to Furo. Because Furo is also a flying type that is immune to, and thus like Stantler calling Earthquake from it, it just, if it calls Earthquake, it's kind of bad. This issue also exists for Graveler, although compared to other Pokemon I mentioned, the rest Graveler is pretty viable. Its Stantler is much more. Sleeping Stantler is much more favored against Graveler than it is against all of these other than Zachu and Furo, because Stantler is faster, meaning it gets more opportunities to get good Septugos versus it, but it's still not at all a Pokemon you want to be unfavored versus. Especially since Graveler fits well in the bounce teams that Stantler is supposed to be good against. And also, you can generally speaking, you can play it a bit riskier versus Graveler and click Sleep Talks, hoping for a Squid because of how it's faster, but it's still not entirely in your favor, especially because So if a Sleeping Stantler gets taken, gets taken advantage of by these Pokemon, despite getting taken advantage of these Pokemon, Stantler is not insurmountable flaw, and can actually just be a relative, like, and it has a lot of avenues to work around the flaw. One is that these Pokemon still take heavy damage from its returns, meaning that, and another is that Zachu and Furo also what this means is that early game, when Stantler is coming in on, like, say like a Dugong and trying to force Zachu in, it can hit Zachu. It can. Alright, how do I say this? These issues are the reason why these issues can be overcome is that, like, Zachu still does not appreciate taking a return and can easily be forced to rest if it keeps having to switch on Zachu on Stantler. And then once it's asleep, Stantler is much safer versus it, and it can even burn resting turns versus it, so that it can be as threatening as possible once it comes back in on a Pokemon that it threatens out more effectively. And it's a similar dynamic with Furo too, and Furo is arguably even easier to wear down than Zachu because of double edge recoil. And also, Stantler is not exactly the only Pokemon that Zachu is going to be wanting to switch in on. So if one of your other Pokemon can force Zachu to rest, then Stantler is quite safe. And once Zachu is asleep, then your opponent isn't going to have as many, like, good options to switch in and scare Stantler out. Meaning that Stantler can more easily afford to just go ham and just break holes in the opponent's team. Really, it's just that, like, Stantler doesn't really have any hard walls outside of the stall-specific Shuckle, and which is why a lot of teams heavily rely on out-offensing it. And this can be an issue, especially and out-offensing it can be an issue not just because of the aforementioned issues where it can just force the Pokemon that can out-offense it to rest, like Zatu and Hero, but also because balanced teams struggle more with out offensing it because they don't they run Graveler instead of Panko, meaning that they don't run spikes, meaning that Stantler gets more opportunities to come in. They run more Pokemon that Stantler gets in, can come in on and punish with huge attacks, and also because so these teams and because of this, these teams need to kind of slightly overcompensate. First, I need to go more out of their way to compensate for Stantler. One of the set options being Restock Primate, which, while decent, while good in its own right, is also far from immovable due to its vulnerability to spikes and relative flare. How it's more frail than Zatu. I think even Hero is well, and also because its moves just kind of miss. Now, it is somewhat more threatening to Stantler than Restock Zatu is because it can immediately just kill Stantler compared to Zatu, meaning that Stantler is never going to want to try staying in even against a sleeping Primate because the risk of just getting killed by Cross Drop is too high, but Restock Primate is commonly used on balanced teams with Graveler, Gloom, and Dugong in order to have to deal with Stantler, to Restock Stantler, which really does speak to its prominence. And also, another thing I forgot to mention about Stantler, about Restock Stantler, about why Restock Stantler is much more threatening to balance teams, is because these teams don't have more slower paced Pokemon. It's generally somewhat harder to force it to rest and then punish it for using rest, because these teams don't output as much offense to Stantler as offensive teams do. Speaking of offensive teams, these teams generally have an easier time dealing with Restock Stantler because they usually run Artillery over Dugong, meaning that Stantler has less opportunities to come in. And B, they also they run spikes. And C, it's also because the general fast pace of it means that it generally has more options to punish, meaning that they generally punish Stantler for using rest very well. Especially because these teams because Furo is so good on these teams, and that just kind of just sits on a sleeping Stantler all day. You rest up on Stantler with a full health Zatu and Furo, and it can very easily end badly for you. Also, another big thing about Stantler is that it can give opportunities to Pineco because Pineco only gets 3 KO'd by its return, meaning that it can get up a spike. Meaning that if Pineco comes in at if Pineco is staring down a Stantler at full HP, then Pineco can get up a spike and explode on it, which is really bad. Now, obviously, if Pineco switches into Stantler, it's only going to be able to get up either a Spike or a Boom. But it's still an issue for Stantler. So, despite all these issues, Stantler is still definitely a threat to offensive teams. It's just that you kind of need to play it differently, play it more like a battering ram instead of as a long-term balance breaker. And especially because if they don't have Dugong or another passive Pokemon like Chinchou or Gloom, then you don't need it to stick around as long and can just take full advantage of its wall breaking capabilities early game and just try to get as much damage with it as possible. It's kind of a similar manner to like lead Tauros and RBY Ubers, where because Tauros is no longer the game piece that's the most likely to win you the game, you can just play a lot more aggressively with it early game, even if it means taking a paralysis and just take full advantage of its role-breaking capabilities. Now, as for teammates that I feel like fit Stantler well, a big and kind of obvious one is Pineco, because well, spikes are just kind of broken in general. Not bandwidth broken, obviously. In fact, like GSC would actually be horrible without spikes, but broken in the sense that like they are just so absurd. And spikes just makes it even easier for Stantler to just break shit. It's slightly worse as a beneficiary compared to some other Pokemon, because to a Pokemon, it's slightly worse as a beneficiary of spikes compared to, let's say, Hero, because like spikes don't do anything to its most reliable check in Xatu, but it still really helps in a lot of scenarios. Yeah, and especially because like often this is especially true because offensive teams that Pineco fits on really appreciate Restlog Stantler punishing Dugong, because Dugong is such a massive roadblock to a lot of offensive teams, because as I mentioned earlier, the main offensive core, the big four of the offensive core hate Dugong. Another kind of obvious partner is Weezing, because also another thing I forgot to mention about Pineco is that like it can hit Graveler with a hidden power water or toxic, meaning that it limits Graveler's ability to just kind of take advantage of a resting Stantler. Weezing, what Weezing does is that it provides Stantler with a safety net against Primeape. And is also generally a great offensive part. And it's also generally just a great offensive partner for it. Like you have the two of the most threatening physical attackers in the tier. It makes a good combo for fairly self-explanatory reasons. And also Explosion means that it can get Stantler in safely. Also, like in an end game, like a desperate Xatu looking, also in like a mid to end game, like sometimes Xatu could be like desperate. Someone could be like desperate and like switch Xatu into Weezing. Then Weezing could get a Thunder or an Explosion off, and then Stantler goes even more ham. Weezing Stantler is a core that I have been using a lot recently to great success, and the fact that Weezing pairs so well with Stantler is another big reason why I think, and the fact that the combo of Weezing and Stantler and just the sheer absurdity of the combo is part of another reason why I think Weezing is the best Pokemon in the tier, but that's a topic for another video. I can go off on an equally as long tirade about why it's the best Pokemon in the tier. Also, another thing so there beyond that, like most of the other partners you'll see with Stantler are generally kind of the same partners you'll see with like the Curse Light Screen sets. They generally just fit well on offensive teams. Although I will say though that balance teams that Stantler probably fits well on balancing well. I haven't experimented as much with like a Graveler Green team with Stantler, but I can already see like the synergies, because Rapid Spin makes it even easier for Stantler to just come in on the Pokemon that it needs to grind out, and also the Graveler Boom combo is weak to Dugong, so, and therefore, and what enters Dugong? Ding ding ding, let's talk Stantler. Also, Gloom unleashing a Stun Spore on Xatu means that Stantler means that it can no longer switch to Stantler, and that's really good for it. Also, Stantler being the now you definitely do need a lot more Xatu insurance with this core, because Graveler Gloom sucks against Xatu. Graveler also sucks despite being it super effectively because its special defense is so bad. And Stantler also sucks versus it, but like Graveler, as mentioned earlier, Graveler Gloom teams usually like to fit Dugong on their team, and thus this issue and thus have a much easier time against Xatu. Also, I forgot to mention. Also, one thing I haven't mentioned before is a teammate is Houndour. I haven't experimented with this, but like I can see Houndour working well with Stantler. Although Houndour's viability is like very fringe, and is a very fringe and quite limited in terms of viability. And it might not like but Stantler, the power of Stantler when Xatu is out of the picture is probably absurd enough to where like it's probably worth fitting on with essentially a dead slot on your team. Oh, and I also forgot to mention that Graveler completely shits on Hero, which is really good, which takes advantage of a resting Stantler. And also, it's the same thing with Weezing, where Explosion lets it get in safely. So yeah, that's Rustlock Stantler for you. This set I think is just going to get better and better, and it's an absurdly good set. As of now, I don't think it's broken. I don't think it's like ban-worthy broken. It's busted for sure. But like, I would not support as of now. I would not support a Stantler ban because I think it gets taken, because personally I just think it gets taken advantage of when it's asleep easily enough to where like most teams can handle it well. Like even Bounce, like if I were to advocate for a Stantler ban, I would like say that it hinders the effectiveness of Bounce teams too much. But even then, like even though that I think that's like the most concrete argument for a Stantler ban, I overall don't agree with it because Bounce teams have plenty of options. Not just Rustlock Primate, by the way. I think Firo can kind of fit on Bounce teams as well as there's also Hitmonlee, who takes Stantler's hits way worse, but outspeeds and hits it hard with high jump kick. And also the fact that Graveler also punishes resting Stantler is also a bit big for Bounce teams. I think Bounce teams in general will just adapt to Rustlock Stantler, and will continue to find more ways to just punish its existence. And also in general is, and I thought Stantler is also, I will say though, I do feel as though Stantler is part of the reason why like GSC NU as a whole is kind of like an offense supremacy meta. Although I will say it's not the sole reason. If it was the sole reason, I would advocate for a Stantler ban because it's pretty restricting to have to run an offense lest you just get run over by Stantler. But like there are like far more reasons why GSC NU is an offense supremacy meta. and like it's not, and like for reasons that like it's not even exclusive to just GSC NU. It's a common theme among lower tiers in general, especially old gen lower tiers. Because the thing what you'll observe is you can kind of observe is that like good defensive pokes are very important in the higher tiers, and the higher tiers tend to just take up like a lot of the good defensive Pokemon, meaning that the lower tiers have far less good defensive Pokemon, meaning that make it overall harder for them to handle defensive threats, which is why offense reigns supreme in most lower tiers you'll see. And also why like stall is generally considered bad in most lower tiers. Like stall, like this is actually the tier where Shuckle is the worst in, except for maybe Ubers. The GSC tier where Shuckle is the worst in, except for maybe Ubers, because stall just is extremely passive. Because the passivity of stall is just a bit too much to handle and compare when it's such a fast-paced offensive meta. So yeah, that's Stantler for you. This is one of the most reliable sets. This is one of the most reliable sets I've ever used, and I think its popularity will only continue to grow. So yeah, I hope you learned something. If you disagree with me saying that Stantler isn't broken, or disagree with anything I said in the video overall, please let me know. I'd love to just have a discussion about this. And that's it. See ya.